Today we get to play with this topic called cardiac action potential. It's a super easy topic. Let's try to understand it. Let's try to build some concepts and let's see. So the cardiac potential, right? We are dealing with some sort of potentials, right? Now, a lot of questions here. Now, the number one basic and the most foundational question that you can ask right here is that what is action potential? What really is action potential? An action potential is an electrical signal, right? And this signal is created when a cell membrane that it changes its voltage levels, okay? Its resting membrane potential, the level of voltage across the membrane, it changes for a short time. In other words, I can define this thing. For example, every living cell has a resting membrane potential. Every cell, because every cell has some sort of ionic balance. It's possible that you may have more positively charged ions or something called as negatively charged ions. Okay, so when there's a change of voltage across the channel is happening, across the whole tissue is happening, this is called action potential, right? So every cell has a resting membrane potential. It means that inside the cell there are negative charges than outside. Okay, I mean, so that's the concept right here. I'm trying to talk about it. That's it. So what the hell, how it works? When something stimulates the cell, like maybe a pacemaker current, right? Any sort of current, it irritates or maybe it stimulates it. The membrane depolarizes. Now there's a word called depolarize. Now when I say depolarize, it has two words, de and polarize. Polarize means something on a corner, right? It's polarized. It means it's really, it has very, it's polarized. It means it's charged. Okay, if anything is charged, we say it's polarized. Okay, and depolarized means it's not charged. For example, you may have some sort of opinion that, okay, doing drugs is wrong, right? So you are polarized into thinking that doing drugs is wrong. So your polarized decision or opinion about drugs is that they are wrong, right? So you're polarized, so you're charged. Or you can be polarized in a way that doing drugs is amazing. So I hope you understand this concept, that what polarization it means, right? It means being close to one pole. Okay, so if I make this land, right, this is a land and these are two poles. So if you're in the middle, so you're not close to any pole, right? So you are depolarized right now. But if I say that you're close to this pole, right, so you're polarized. So this is what polarization means. So I was saying that when something stimulates the cell, the membrane become polarized. Sorry, the membrane become depolarized. It means it becomes less charged. Okay, the positive ions, okay, like potassium or calcium, they rush inside. Okay, and once they rush inside, the inside becomes less negatively charged. So the concept here is that this is a membrane, right? And usually I want to explain you what is negative charge and positive charge first. Okay, what is a positive charge? Positive charge is that when you have some charge. Okay, when you have some charge, it means you have positive charge. When you don't have anything in the bucket or in your pocket, then we say that it's a negative charge. Usually absence of a positive charge means a negative charge. Okay, so usually what happened here is that usually cells, right, cells have these intracellular space, right, and then extracellular space, right? We call it intracellular fluid and extracellular fluid, right? So internally cells do not have these amazingly charged things, right? They have these channels, they keep pushing out, they keep this channel open so that any sort of charge that accumulates inside the cell, it's pushed out, because charges are super radical, they can destroy things. So work of these channels is to just keep pushing out the charges outside so that the internal of the cell is negatively charged. Now, negatively charged, it means absence of charge. So you want the cell membrane to be negatively charged because you want the cell to have no charge in it. Because I hope it makes sense on a physicality level. Because if you have some charge already present inside the cell, you're gonna have problems. Because I mean, this charge is not gonna like just sit idle. It's gonna mess with the internal working of the cell, right? So the cell wants itself to be on a resting membrane potential of negative 90 millivolt, or maybe minus 60, or maybe minus 70, depending upon, but all of them are are negative because they have absence of charge. They don't have charge inside. So that's the one very basic concept in in order to understand this whole cardiac action potential. Okay, so anything that stimulates the charge, the membrane depolarizes, right? And the positive ions that are outside waiting to come inside the the membrane to to put some sort of things to start, right? So we have these sodium, these calciums, they are waiting outside the cell and they want to get inside the cell because they want to start this machinery of the cell. And this machinery of the cell starts once these highly charged atoms of sodium and calcium they get inside the cell. Right now we have these channels, they can come through these channels. Okay, because usually cell has bilipid layer, and this bilipid layer really stops these ions from attacking inside, going inside. So that's one concept right there. So positive ions like sodium and potassium, right, they rush inside. The inside of the cell becomes less negative because now the inside has something, because the cell had nothing when we started our discussion, right? So it's now a little bit more positive than it was, right? So this sudden change in voltage, right, is called action potential. This sudden change in voltage level, right? Because once we started the discussion, we started with a pre-assumption that the cell has minus negative millivolt. It means that plus 90 is outside the cell, and inside there is a vacant space of minus 90. So for example, plus 45 worth of charge, it rushes inside. So like suddenly the resting membrane potential of this cell jumps from minus 90 to minus 45. So this change is this change of voltage actually is called action potential. So I hope I'm able to teach you this concept of action potential, right? So what happens when this happens, right? So this sudden change happens and we call this action potential. Then the cell repolarizes, right? Repolarize means it again loses these ions, right? These ions were inside and now these ions again rush outside, and then the cell again becomes highly negatively charged, right? Not really negatively charged, it just loses these positively charged ion, and now there is this vacant space inside the cell. So outside of the cell is positively charged, has more charges than the inside. So that's why outside is positively charged and negatively charged inside. I hope this makes sense to you. So the cell repolarizes, and the positive ions, K, right? So they leave the cell, right? And inside of the cell becomes negative again, and then this cycle keeps happening again and again. So this spike and return, right? This is one action potential. Okay, this is one action potential. This depolarization and then repolarization, this is one action potential. I hope this one cycle is called action potential. This depolarization and repolarization, I hope it makes sense to you. Okay, so cardiac action potential. So this was cardiac action potential in simple words, right? So simple sequence is that the resting state of a cell is usually negatively charged, and it get depolarized means from polarized, that was from 90, it get depolarized to minus 45 or maybe minus 40, whatever it is, and then it repolarizes to minus 90, and this is one action potential. Okay, it matters because if you change the resting membrane potential of some cell, we can we can fundamentally change how fast any cell really how fast any cell performs this action potential. If you change this resting, for example, a cell sits at around -60, then we just need less ions, right? If a cell is like 110, -110, we need more ion to push this resting membrane potential to the threshold potential for this action potential to happen. Okay, so in neurons, action potential sends message. In hearts, they send this heartbeat, they make this heartbeat. In muscles, the contractions happen. So action potential is very important. Okay, think it of a switch, think of a cell like a charged battery. Okay, when the switch flips, the charge flows. Once that charge flows, that's your action potential right there. Once it finishes, the battery recharges for the next cycle. Okay, so I hope I'm able to really dig deep inside this concept of action potential. Okay, so we have this SA node and VA, or AV node, whatever you want to call it, right? So we have this SA and then this AV, right? And these two nodes, right? Now, why do we call them nodes? So it's really weird name because there's a word NODE, node, right? NOD, nodal. So NODE, node, it means a knot. NOT, knot, or it means a small cluster, right? In biology, node is used for something, a dense cluster or maybe a center, right? So wherever you see this word node, think about a center of an epicenter of some cell. Okay, so SA node and AV node, these are small dense groups of specialized cardiac cells. Okay, they are not typical cardiac cell, and they control the heart rhythm. Okay, so I hope you understand this. So this word called SA, right? The word SA node, the real meaning here is that sinoatrial node. Okay, so here sino plus atrial, right? Now this sino, it means sinus. Okay, sinus venosa. And sinus venosa, if you have studied some sort of embryology, I mean, in early embryonic structures, there's this structure, it's called sinus venosa, and this structure that becomes part of the right atrium. Okay, so that's the idea of the naming. Okay, so that's the naming scheme here. So sinoatrium, right? So sinus plus atrium. So a node that is present on the atrium is SA node, a cluster of pacemaker cells where the sinus venosa joins the right atrium. So that's the whole story. Now, to really understand that sentence, you must Google this thing called sinus venosus, whatever you want to say, and you will understand what I'm talking about. And now this SA node is located on the wall, right? On the wall, stina, if you speak Russian. So on the wall of right atrium. Okay, so we have, of course, we have left and right atrium. Right atrium of the like the roof above. This is the ventricle, right? Okay, so on the wall of the right atrium, near the opening of the superior vena cava, that's the location of SA node. Now, I may be wrong here, but okay, I just remembered it this way. Okay, so let's really talk into this SA node, right? Because we have been talking about SA node for last 15 minutes, and we have not studied anything about it. So, SA node. So SA node, nodal potential and pacemaker, right there, and they are the electrical activities that are done by SA node. We're gonna read about that. And so here's the thing: RMP, resting membrane potential of SA node, right, of these cells that are present in this node, they have this restless membrane potential. Why is it restless? What's the real meaning of this word restless here? Restless means it is never resting at any membrane, at not any potential. For example, it keeps circling from minus 60 to minus 40. It keeps going like that. Remember that at minus 40 there is threshold which is achieved. Once threshold is achieved, the action potential is fired. Okay, once the action potential is fired, the resting membrane potential goes back to minus 60 where it's resting, and it's not really resting, it again goes back to minus 40. And this rhythm is a rhythmic, it's the rhythm of your heartbeat, right? So this rhythm is needed, and for this rhythm we have this restless membrane potential that moves from minus 60 to minus 40. That's the idea right there. And the property of SA node is that, what's its property means, what's the function? Is that it is chronotrophy. Now the word chronotrophy, it means rate of impulse generation, okay? How much the impulse is getting generated. So think of your heart as a synchronized music orchestra. The SAnode is this conductor, is this conductor that that tells the musicians, okay, sing this way, or maybe play your instruments that way. So this is the conductor of this orchestra, okay? And your ventricles are these big musicians, right? So this is SAnode simply, and it generates this impulse. It's a impulse generator. So chronotrophy, heart rate generation, right? And let's talk about the phases of how it really happens, right? Because we want to know about it. Before that, I want to make sure that I expose you guys to some of these terms called dromotrophy. Dromotrophy means the conduction velocity, how fast the 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 velocity of conduction is happening. For example, something can be positive dromotrophic and negative dromotrophic. It means something will influence the things in such a way that the speed of conduction will go down and the speed of conduction can go up. So I hope you understand this. Other word is called lusitrophy. Lusitrophy means the ability of ventricles to relax. If something is positively lusitrophic, it means that the ventricles are relaxing more. It means the filling of ventricles happens a lot. So usually the usual idea is that the ventricles are relaxed. They are going inside this diastolic phase of relaxation, and this relaxation is the reason of your filling of ventricles, right? So if something is positively lusitrophic, it means the ventricles are really relaxing, so you have good ventricular filling, okay? So I hope you understand this word. Okay, so here's this chronotrophy, right? Heart rate generation, right? It happens. Now how it really happens, right? So we have this SA node, right? It's present on the wall, right? On the wall, and it is responsible for this impulse generation. Now how it happens? Now SA node is really slow, okay? But it's really, really, really automatic. You don't need much things to make sure that it's really automatic. It's just automatic. It's like really amazing. And amazing thing is that it never resets. It's just restlessly moving from minus 60 to minus 40 like this. And it's amazing how it happens. So the phases, right? We have these phases called phase 4, phase 0, phase 3. So this is phase 3, the whole thing. This is phase 4, and this is phase 0. Now this is amazing how it happens. Let's talk a little bit about them, right? So this phase 4 is called pre-potential. Now if I'm saying it's a pre-potential, it means pre means before, potential means here just before the threshold is reached. So minus 40, right? This is where everything changes, okay? So let's talk here what happened. Phases, right? Let's talk first phase 4, then SA node reaches as phase 2. Now then there is phase 3, okay? And then again like this happens, this cycle. And this is restless, by the way. This is not, the cells of SA node are not resting anytime. They start from your childhood, they start from your childbirth, and they keep they just keep working, and they work for 100 years, and it's amazing how that works. So phase 4, what happened here in this phase is that these sodium, positively charged sodium, right, they come inside the cell, and these T-type calcium channels, okay? T-type, T means transient here. Transient means for a small time, okay? So transient calcium channels. So we have these transient, funny, and this potassium. So we have these, right? And here what's really happening is that there are three things happening in phase 3. First is these sodium channels, right? Sodium channels open, and these sodium channels are called hyper hyperpolarized. Hyperpolarized means really charged, right? Hyperpolarized, right? It's really charged. It means it's really negatively charged, okay? Hyperpolarized cyclic nucleotide channels. So these channels, they open. Once they open, a lot of sodium, they come inside the cell. Sodium come inside the cell, and now we know sodium is positively charged. Now the sodium, which is positively charged, it influences the resting membrane potential of the, these SAnodal cells. And what happened here is that from minus 60, there's a little jump towards minus 40. Maybe it's minus 50 around, okay? Now, after that, what happened here is that we have these transient calcium channels. Like, it is transient, it means it's for a short time. Now they open up, and then we have this calcium influx from outside the cells to inside. So again, we have a little entry of these positively charged ions. Again, calcium comes in. Once the calcium comes in, it again influences the resting membrane potential from minus 50 to again jump maybe to minus 45, right, 45. And now the third step is that potassium efflux, right? Efflux means exit. So the positively charged potassium, it goes out, it exits the cell. Once it exits the cell loses it, negatively charges, and the cell again moves from minus 45 to minus 40. So now the cell has reached minus 40. So I hope you understand this, right? So minus 40, the cell has now reached minus 40. Which cell? SAnodal cells. They have reached here at minus 40 here because of these three things, right? Sodium inside, calcium inside, and potassium outside, right? And now we are here, right? Imagine you are one of those SA cells. So what happened next? What happened is that a phase 0 starts. In this phase, the calcium channels, what type of calcium channels? L type. L means long lasting. So they open for a long time, right? So they open up. So long lasting calcium channel open up. Once they open, right, a lot of calcium, it rushes inside. Okay, once it rushes inside, again the negativity of the cell, it changes. Now once the calcium rushes inside the cell, it depolarizes, right? We achieve this depolarization in a very steep graph. So it means if the graph is very steep, right, it's almost as if it's like a straight line. It means that what it physically means in physicality. In physicality, it means that we had a bunch of calcium that was pushed inside our cell. That's why the graph is really straight. If we had less amount of calcium, then the graph would have been like that. But the graph is like that. It means we had a lot of calcium that was pushed inside the cell. So so a lot of calcium, it rushes inside. Now we achieve something called as depolarization. What depolarization is? Basically, depolarization, right? It's really not negatively charged. What depolarization usually is. So now the cell is not really charged, or I can say now the cell is really positively charged. Okay, so I hope you understand this difference of positive charge and negative charge. Positive charge is just that when we have some charge. So where this charge come from? This charge comes from calcium, potassium, this sodium, and again transient calcium, right? So we have some charge. It means the cell is now positively charged, right? When the cell was negatively charged, it means it had no charges inside. Absence of positive charge is called negative charge. I hope you know that. And if you don't, it doesn't really matter because you can always learn this. So now we have achieved the depolarization, right? And now the phase three starts. Now what happens here is that a lot of potassium, right, K plus, this is pushed outside the cell. Now if a lot was pushed, right, a lot, imagine if bunch of potassium was pushed out, the graph would be like that. But it is more, I mean, it's less than, this graph. If it was a lot, then it would have been like that. But the amount of potassium that was pushed out from the cell was less, so the graph is like that. I hope you understand this physicality, because it's really important to understand this graph. It's easy to understand this whole thing with using this graph, right? So potassium is now pushed out. Once the potassium is pushed out, we are basically what we are doing is that we are just physically removing these positive charges. Once we remove this positive charge, the cell will become negatively charged again, so repolarization will be achieved again. So repolarization is done. So the key concept here is that, as you can notice, these phases are really weirdly named, right? Phase 4, and then phase 0, and then phase 3. Why not 1, 2, 3, 4? Because this SA node does not have, it's a basic question, right? Where is phase 1 and phase 2, right? The SA node does not have phase 1 or 2 because it is designed for a rhythm, okay? Not for a strength, or not for any sort of strength game, okay? It is for rhythm. It's like a rhythm going on right here, okay? You don't need phase 1 and phase 2, right? We will study about phase 1 and phase 2 in these AV nodes, right? So here phase 1 leads to phase 0, and phase 0 leads to phase 3, and then again this whole cycle repeats. So this is why SA node is described as a restless membrane potential moving from -60 to -40. One cool thing is that our gastric cells, especially the pacemaker gastric cells, those are called Cajal cells, and these Cajal cells are also restless in nature. They're also moving all the time. So this is the concept of SAnodal, SAnode action potential, right? So let's talk a little bit about ventricular action potential now. Ventricular action potential, the contractile AP, right? Now, once the SA node fires, the impulse spreads to the ventricle, right? And after a short delay, right, the ventricular cells, they respond with a very fast and very powerful action potential. And this fast and this powerful action potential is amazing for the contraction. So now I have exposed you to this idea that these SA node have made this amazingly strong, not strong, amazingly impulse that now has traveled to ventricular cells, right? Now this ventricular cells, right, they have something called as AV, something called as AV node, right? Now this AV node actually stops the impulse for some time, around 0.1 second, so that our ventricles have enough blood to contract so that it can push the blood outside. So let's try to understand the phases in ventricular myocytes, right? We call them ventricular myocytes because myo means muscle, cytes means cells, and yeah, that's why they're named as ventricular myocytes.